Hello and welcome to your Extension's New Teacher Support Series. This is going to be the first session in our support series, and it is taking place on September 17th, 2024. Today we are going to talk about important people to know in our ECCT team. We are going to talk a little bit about what the new teacher support series is going to look like, its objectives, and then we are going to dive into understanding autism, what your classroom should look like in our extensions program, and some curriculum tools that you have access to. Let's start by introducing some important people that you should know. Some of your support people from the EC department are going to be Erica Rogers. She's our program manager for extensions. Mary Allen, Jennifer Reese, Deanne McLeod, Kristen Bogiagis, or Bo, and Sonia Mays. We are all your EP ECCTs, and we are here to support you. And you will get a copy of this presentation so that you'll be able to access these emails. The objective of the new teacher support series is to support novice teachers with 3 years or less classroom experience. You guys are going to have the opportunity to collaborate and discuss, create, implement some learning activities that are going to facilitate learning within your extensions classrooms through evidence-based practices. Here's what the Extensions New Teacher Support Series is going to look like. Teachers are going to have the opportunity to earn 1.6 CEUs for participating in the training series. The Extensions New Teacher Support Series is going to meet a total of 8 session opportunities. You are going to be able to choose from our morning or afternoon blocks. 4 of the sessions are going to be in person, and 4 of the sessions are going to be open forum virtual support sessions. The in-person sessions are going to be 3 hours long. The morning sessions are going to be from 8:30 to 11:30. And our afternoon sessions are going to be 12:30 to 3:30. Both of these sessions are going to have the same content, so you'll pick either the morning or the afternoon session. Our upcoming sessions are going to be on October 22nd and December 17th, and we are going to have some sessions to be announced in April and May. The 4 sessions that are going to be open forum virtual support sessions are going to be an hour in length. You can choose morning or afternoon, and we have those set for this one that's happening September 17th, November 19th, January 21st, and March 18th. One important session that I want to highlight here is the session that's going to be able to take place on February 17th. It's going to be a full day session, so it'll be from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. It'll take place at SPA, and you want to make sure that you register for this course separately in True North Logic. So when you go to My Talent, you can use this registration link when you have access to this presentation, but you want to make sure that you enroll in not only the new teacher support series, but this professional development separately. And this is going to be the opportunity to work with related service providers. So your occupational therapists, your physical therapists, and also your speech pathologists are going to be present and supporting you at this session. I want to dive into this slide. This is understanding the needs of a new teacher and the phases of the first year. Sometimes this is just our first year, but it can continue into that second year, third year. So just know that as a beginning teacher, this is a natural course of events to process yourself through as you are making your way through the school year. We always start off with that anticipation, right? We are ready for the school year. We are excited. We have all these new ideas and we are ready to go. We are starting off high, right? And that's usually us in August. But as we dive into September and October, we really find ourselves in survival mode. So many new things. Maybe some of the things that you were super excited about at the beginning of the year are just not working out. You're having to be adaptable and you are really in that survival mode. You are progress monitoring. You want to take the data. You want to have the meetings. There's so many things to do. And sometimes this can put you into survival mode. And just know that is a great time to ask for help. That's a great place to start asking those questions. Do not think that you're in this alone. You have support from your ECCTs. You have support from your school-based staff. So that is the time to reach out and ask for help. But this can often lead into that phase of disillusionment, right? When we get into those winter months, sometimes we find ourselves thinking like, I'm working so hard. Is everything that I'm doing worth it? Like what kind of results am I yielding? I'm not seeing the results that I want. Sometimes you can have that disillusionment when it comes in to those winter months, right? But as we move into the beginning of spring, we often find ourselves rejuvenated. We're starting to see the impacts of all the work that we're putting in, the interventions, the behavioral supports, all these things that we are working so hard to do, the things we are excited about at the beginning of the year. We're getting to see the results really come into play. You get to see your kids grow. And that moves you right into that April, May, June, where you're reflecting. You're looking at the data, you're looking at the results of your interventions and saying, what did I do that I want to do again? What did I do that worked? What did I do that didn't work that I don't want to do again? And that leads you right into anticipation again. What am I going to do next year? I'm so excited to have this kid in my class again, because often in extensions, we get to serve our students for multiple years. So it is very natural to get excited about what you're going to do for that student the next year. So you roll into anticipation, you take the break that you need over the summer, and it just leads right back into the anticipation for the new school year. I really want to take the time to talk to you guys about the just fundamentals of autism spectrum. This is something that's really important to have a good grasp on when you're working in our extensions classrooms, because we are often going to find ourselves serving this population of students. Autism spectrum disorder refers to a broad range of conditions that are characterized with challenges in social skills, restrictive and repetitive behaviors, and then challenges with communication as well. It's important to remember that autism is a spectrum. Every person is unique. So if you know one person with autism, you know one person with autism. That's something that you will hear people say, especially those of us who are seasoned in working with people who are on the spectrum. It truly is a spectrum. You can be very highly intelligent, but really struggle with expressive speech or receptive speech. You can be extremely hypersensitive to sensory stimuli, but maybe have very poor pragmatic and social skills. Maybe you have a special interest area that is very strong for you, like math, but you're struggling when it comes to reading. Like, these individuals are truly individuals. So it's important to realize that it is a spectrum and not to paint autism with a broad paintbrush. Something that you may see with your students who are on the spectrum are challenges with social interactions. Maybe starting conversations or taking turns might be something you see that they are challenged with. Sharing interests or emotions might be a challenge for them as well, or oversharing interests and oversharing emotions. It is a spectrum. So understanding what others are thinking can also be a challenge for our students on the spectrum. We call this theory of mind. And that theory states that you may understand your own emotions and your own thoughts, but you don't understand that other people have those emotions and thoughts as well. So it's very important for us to teach that explicitly. If you are feeling a feeling, you want to express that to your student. When you do that, that makes me sad, because a lot of times our students who are on the spectrum do not have a good grasp of the fact that you feel sadness or you feel joy. We have to teach that explicitly. Developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships can also be a challenge. Expressing feelings and seeking emotional comfort from others is something that you might see as a challenge for our students who are on the spectrum. Making friends and playing with peers. A lot of times you'll see playing alongside peers, but not necessarily engaging in that turn taking or that social interaction that's playing with peers. They might have challenges with understanding boundaries or personal space. Feeling overwhelmed in social situations is something you might see as well. A lot of times, being overwhelmed in a social situation can be the antecedent that causes a behavior, and it's just something that can happen. They can get overstimulated, and we'll talk about some sensory needs a couple slides from now, but that can overstimulate their hearing or their vision, and this is something that can cause a meltdown. Communication can often be a challenge as well. This might present itself as a difficulty making eye contact. It might seem like a student is not paying attention because they are not looking at you when you're speaking, or they're not looking at the board when you're teaching, but this is not always the case. Often we find that our students with autism are paying attention, but they're just not maintaining that pragmatic eye contact that we're used to with some individuals without autism. So understanding other people's body languages, gestures, and facial expressions can also be a challenge. You might see your students with autism not understanding that when you're upset and you make an angry face or a sad face, that you're upset at all. You have to be explicit in explaining the connection between facial expressions and feelings, which means you also have to be explicit in explaining the feelings themselves. So that's why social emotional learning is so important for our students who are on the spectrum. You might also find that your students who are on the autism spectrum have trouble regulating their tone of voice. And this is a communication challenge. They might speak too loudly or too quietly, or you might find that they're speaking in a monotone voice or a very high-pitched voice. These are some things that you might observe with your students with autism. You may also see repetitive movements, play, or speech patterns. Something that I'm sure you've heard before is the concept of stimming. Stimming is when you're making repetitive body movements to regulate emotions. So you might see them rocking or using hand flapping, spinning, or running back and forth or pacing. Those are some things that we would categorize as a stim. You might also see them lining up toys in a row or spinning wheels or repeatedly flipping switches to get that feedback that they're seeking, that sensory feedback. And these are just some things that you may observe. Now, like I said before, it's a spectrum. You might have a student who does not do these things. It does not mean that they're not on the spectrum. They could have greater challenges in communication and social, emotional competencies and pragmatics, but maybe they are not having trouble or challenges with repetitive movements. This is really why you have to look at the individual. You may also see them imitating other person's speech or repeating words and phrases, and this is something that is known as echolalia. Echolalia could be repeating their favorite story from front to cover, and they know the whole thing word for word, or their favorite line from a TV show, just repetitively repeating that. And that is something that you may see in your students with autism. And this can sometimes be functional communication, but often it is not a form of functional communication. So it's often just related to repetitive speech and doesn't actually indicate a desire to communicate that phrase or words or whatever it is that they're echoing. Instances on sameness and the need for routine. So this one's really important because this is often an antecedent that we see our students experiencing before we have a behavior, before we have a moment, right? So extreme distress at even the smallest changes in plan or routine. Ritualistic behaviors, maybe watching the same video over and over again, repeatedly touching objects in a certain order, the need for routine, daily schedules, continued or consistent meal options, clothes, routine. They can tend to be very ritualistic and rigid in their routines. This is a really important concept to understand because often we hear teachers say like, oh, he just, he had a behavior, an outburst out of nowhere. But it could be maybe we didn't go to specials that day and every other day we have gone to specials. And that's why visual schedules are so important and they can make such a huge impact for our students, because it helps them to anticipate change. So there may still be some distress, but there'll be less distress if it's not a surprise. Nobody likes surprises, but especially our students with autism. We don't want to be surprising them. We want to make sure that they are able to anticipate changes because this can be such a huge challenge for our students. You might see that your students with autism show an intense or highly focused interest on specific or narrowed topics. So they can have a very strong attachment to trains or planets, and they want to talk about these things nonstop, even if it seems like the other party is not interested in those things at all. They are very interested and hyper-focused on specific topics. And you can even see this transfer into strong attachments with objects, like a toy or a figurine, something they're very attached to. You might also see students with autism in your class have a under or over sensitivity to sensory stimulation. So sensory differences like a atypical sensitivity to light or sound, touch, or different textures. That is something you might notice in your students. You may even notice a lack of sensitivity to like pain or temperature. And that is something that is very common that you might see. And in response to these different the sensory differences, you might see them using sensory seeking behaviors. For example, smelling or touching objects, visually fascinated on things with lights or movement. That is something that you may observe with your students on the spectrum. It is important to be very aware of these different sensory needs, right? We want to make sure that if our students are very sensitive to light, for example, turning the lights off and on might not be good practice in your classroom because it might be the antecedent to a behavior that is completely avoidable by adjusting their environment so that they can be in a really conducive space for learning. We don't need lights turning off and on. We don't need that in our educational environment. That is something that we can change. Or if they have an aversion to certain textures, like they don't like the feeling of the plastic on their chair in the classroom, that is something that we have the power to change in our extensions classrooms. So change it. It's something that we can work on to meet their sensory needs. I want to talk to you a little bit about functional communication. This is important not only for our students who are on the spectrum because they have challenges with that functional communication, but it's important for anyone in your classroom, no matter their needs. Everyone deserves a chance to communicate, and we really need to be teaching our students how to get their basic wants and needs met using socially appropriate communication. Everyone in your classroom should be able to tell you if they are hungry or thirsty, if they have to go to the bathroom, if they need help, if they need a break, or if they are done. They should have access to yes and no. These are some things that are so important because often behavior is just a form of communication and we can avoid outbursts or overstimulation just by providing them functional communication. And there's lots of ways that you can do that. We call it assistive technology for communication. You have low tech, no tech, and high tech options. Some of your no tech options might be sign language or the use of picture communication. Some low tech objects or options might be that voice output device. You can see single talks, but you can also see multi-talks. There's lots of different options for that. That's something you can get with your speech therapist or your occupational therapist to really get a better understanding of. And you might have a text to speak in your classroom, or a student may come with a text to speak. These are really cool if they can type out what they need, and then it's a great form of communication and it's still low tech. Some of our high tech options would be the communication boards on their tablets, for example. I know that a lot of us have seen that, but what you may have not seen is the eye gaze communication. So, for example, one of the brands is the Tobii Dynavox, and that allows students to use eye gaze. It tracks their eye gaze so that they can use a communication board on a tablet. So there's lots of great options. These are just a small collection of objects. We know that it is our job to make sure that we are giving students the opportunity to communicate their wants and needs and to communicate to engage with their academic environment. So we need to be using these things for our students who are atypical communicators, nonverbal communicators. These are just some helpful hints that I really want you to think about while you're serving our students across the board, but especially our students who are on the autism spectrum. You want to recognize and avoid sensory overload. And if there's something you can do so that they can continue functional participation in their academic environment, and all it is removing a sensory overload like sensitivity to light or sound. Do we need headphones to support us so that we can have some noise canceling headphones? It's our job to be able to remove some of those sensory overloads so that they can learn. We want to be able to offer natural rewards. A natural reward might be, for example, you might be working on math right now, but I might use a First Then board that says, yeah, we're working on math, but next we're doing snack, and that's something that you love. That's a natural reward. It is going to happen in your schedule regardless. It's not like you're rewarding them with food, but you're rewarding them by letting them know that there's a preferred activity that's coming up. Another natural reward would be the ability to make choices. If they have a little, quote, downtime, and I don't like the phrase downtime, but a little bit of, quote, choice time, letting them choose. Do you want Play-Doh or do you want blocks? You have 10 minutes to have free choice time. And making sure that you're using those visual supports. That is an evidence-based practice. All of these things are evidence-based practices, but visual aids is truly an effective evidence-based practice for our students. You want to be providing them those visual aid opportunities to increase their communication, and that will decrease frustration. You also want to be the one who is encouraging social interactions with others. We talked about how our students who are on the autism spectrum might not be as intuitive with those pragmatic skills. We need to be modeling and facilitating those interactions because they have to be taught explicitly. They are not just going to be observed and learned. You need to be teaching them how to have these appropriate responses to different feelings and those interactions where you say hello to somebody when they walk in the room. You want to model and you want to explicitly teach those. And most importantly, be patient. We want to be patient, we want to be kind, we love our students, and we want to be taking care of them and let them know that school is a safe place. And part of that is being patient, not taking things personally because it is not personal. When they are overloaded by a sensory stimuli, it is not personal. So don't take it personally. Just let it roll off your back and know that you are there to support them and you are going to be their biggest cheerleader. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about what an extensions program classroom should look like. What you want to do when you're getting started is you want to take an inventory of the furniture that you have available to you. This is when you are going to be an abstract thinker because every classroom is going to have different furniture, different resources. You need to see what you have. What do I have in this room? And you want to think about things that were going to be in your schedule in relation to the grades that you work with. So academics, related service, independent work, break times and calm down spaces. Think about all these things that you're going to have in your schedule and you need to make spaces for them. So you want to look at the furniture that you have in your space. What do I need to do to make stations? I know I'm going to be differentiating instruction. I need multiple areas to work. Think about your schedule and what you want instruction to look like at each time. Over plan, that's how you deliver because not everything is always going to be according to plan. It's not going to work out perfectly, but if you plan for certain things to be in certain places, you make that expectation and you'll be surprised at the results. It really does help to have that structure. You need that structure in our classrooms. Moving on to structure. So you need to know what is happening in each station. Never just think that students are going to have intuition toward what's supposed to happen in that station. If you have it in your mind, you want to make sure that you're being explicit in explaining that, not only to your students, but for your staff as well. You're working in a group with multiple staff members, which is great. We're happy to have a bunch of people in the room supporting us, but they need to know what you're imagining as well. So what is staff going to be doing at that station? What do you want students to be doing at that station? And then you need to make sure that you tell the staff and the students what you want to be doing at that station so that your vision can come to life. There are a couple different, and we talked about, we have whole group, small group, independent. We're going to break those down a little bit. So whole group. Whole group is where your class convenes throughout the day. So this is home base. I always think of this as home base. You might utilize this space for whole group lessons. You might do your morning meeting here, read alouds, and that U-shaped format that you're seeing in the picture over there, therapy activities. You could be doing extra small group spaces. So for example, this might be the place where you do your morning meeting. And then when you break up into smaller groups, half of your kids might go to independent workstations and half of them might stay in the U-shape and do their small group activity there. You have to make your space work for you. Have enough spaces for staff to use at the same time. This is so important. When you're doing your small group, which are essential for differentiation, when you're doing those small groups, you want to make sure that they are staff-led and they encompass what you need to have done in that rotation. So for example, you want to have academic rotations, you want to be working on IEP goals, and then you also want a space for therapy push-in. Now that's his pullouts as well, if they're being pulled from the class, but typically if you're getting pulled out of the class, they're going to have a space where they're taking them. What you will often see within our extensions program classes is that they need a space within your classroom to work with students, let's say with speech therapy. And the reason that is sometimes we want to minimize those transitions. Now, if somebody's working on a transition from point A to point B, okay, you might have that transition. But transitions can often lead to loss of time and distraction, and they can sometimes lead to behaviors as well. So you will see speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists pushing into your classroom, and you want to make sure that you have a standing space for them when they come in. Independent stations are so important because we are always trying to increase independence. Everyone has a spectrum of where their independence may lie. We have some students who are going to be fully independent, and that is awesome. But then we have a lot of our students who are going to need that continued para support. So we want to make sure that we have these stations so we are increasing independence, and we are really facilitating that opportunity for our students. So with or without para support, you want to goal to fade prompts and supports is always the goal, right? So we want students to be as independent as possible. And that looks different for every student. That's part of how we differentiate. And the way that you can use the space is you can do workstation, so give them a side task. You can do technology time. So maybe this is where they have their ULS assignments assigned to them and they're working on their iPad and they're doing individual stories. It can also be a quiet sensory time space. So they may have some sensory toys, some fidgets, whatever it may be, something that's personal to them at their individual station. You got to make these stations work for you and your students. It is essential to have a cool down break sensory space. You might hear this referred to as a calm down corner. This really gives, and we don't mean timeout in that traditional sense like a punishment, because that is not what this is. It is time away, time out of the space where they have assigned, this is where I do my work, this is where I do my individual work, this is whole group. They need a space for calming down. You want to create this space. It can be a reading corner. It can be a break space. It can be a sensory space. And make sure that it has some visual supports. What do you want to accomplish in this space? If it's a calm down corner, you want to have visuals that might say, stop, quiet, listen, eyes focus. There are so many things that you can put in that space. They're going to be personal to your students, and you got to make that space work for your students who really need that calm down space. You hear me keep saying this, make your space work for you. You have to look at what you have and make your space work for you. You are going to know your students best, and you're going to know what they need, and you know what you need to get your job done. So really take note of that. You have an elementary school classroom, like right up here in the left corner, top here, is going to look really different from this high school classroom over here in the bottom right corner. And, these middle pictures, they could be middle school, they could be upper elementary. Those are a little bit more questionable. Like that could be anything, but, it really is focused on your students. The group that you're serving, you want to make sure that it's appropriate for them and it has everything they need in the space. Something really important to understand is the idea of boundaries. So you can have physical boundaries or you can have visual boundaries. These are room dividers. So like a room divider is great, right? But they're really expensive. And you might already have a room divider in your room. That's awesome. I'm so happy for you. But a lot of us don't. So there are alternate ways to create boundaries, such as a visual support of colorful tape or strategic furniture placement through like bookshelves or whatever you may have in the room. And you have to think of the student needs, like do I have a runner? Do I have an eloper or someone who tries to escape academic tasks? You might need that student to be strategically placed away from the classroom door so you have a little bit more time to respond to that runner and catch them before they get to the door. You always want to think about accessibility. So is my space accessible for my wheelchair students, my students who are in wheelchairs or have physical needs? Perhaps they're in a walker. You don't want a student to feel limited in their access of your classroom just because they don't fit, because that is not a good feeling. We want our student spaces to fit all of our students if possible. Here are some examples of physical boundaries. You see that in an individual workstation up at the top left corner. You also see the use of some bookshelves in the next picture. I really like the picture after that because it's bookshelves, but it's also a small group. You see a little bit of calm down corner down in the bottom left. And on the bottom right, you see a chair. And this is an example of the type of chair that you might see in a classroom where the student may need just that cradling. So the support of having those armrests. This can be very effective in creating a physical boundary for the student, understanding that that chair is their space. Something else you can do to really help students understand their space and where they need to be is creating a tape boundary. So in the first two pictures, you see that they've created that tape boundary for the individual student at their workstation. But this can also be used to divide individual spaces on a desk. And I love how this picture on the or on the far right shows the student names, and it really has it blocked out so that they have their clear areas where they need to have their materials so that they're not getting each other's spaces, and that can help a lot. Something I want to talk to you about too is schedules. So visual schedules are essential. You want to have those schedules posted. You want to teach them and you want to review them as much as possible. We're pretty early in the school year. It's September. You should still be reviewing that schedule every day, because an evidence-based practice for our students in the extensions program is truly repetition. They're not going to get bored by it. If they do and they let you know, that's a wonderful communication, but we really need to be teaching those schedules to our students every day. Don't just assume that they are picking it up. You want to make sure that they're really committing it to memory so that we can anticipate what's coming next. On the bottom here, you see some examples. We have a first then board. I love this because it can be used to help anticipate events, but it can also be used for a reward token system in a way. So you can say first we're doing math and then we are going to do blocks, like they can pick what their reward might be for completing a task. Or you can use this as a very simplified schedule. So you can say first we are doing math and then we are going to lunch. First we are doing ELA and then we are going to recess. Though it can just be a form of schedule where they understand what's coming next. And it's a great way to build into the next schedule that you see there, where it becomes a little bit more complex, right? We can start adding 3 or 4 events so that they know what's coming next, 3 or 4 steps in the future. And then maybe they get a little star or a token every time they complete arrival, breakfast, recess. Every time they complete it, they get a stamp or a star or some kind of token, and it helps them know that they're getting through the day and what's going to come next. The next schedule is a little bit more advanced, right? It has the words and then the pictures associated with. No token system. At this point, we're moving past tokens. We're not getting rewards for just getting through the day because we've moved past that. We don't need that anymore. And then even more advanced, you see Anthony's schedule, which is literally just written out for Anthony. He still needs the supports of understanding what's coming next. We all love that. We all thrive in knowing what's going to come next. We don't like surprises, and he is advanced but still needs that support. And Evelyn's schedule is a more simplified version with the pictures drawn out by the teacher, but this is something that you can just make in the morning and throw on Evelyn's desk. If that serves her needs, then that serves her needs. And then all the way on the right top, that's an example of a whole class schedule that you might see posted. These are essential, required, whatever words you want to use. You need to have your schedule posted, and it needs to be visually appropriate. So the best way to do that is make sure that it has a combination of words and pictures, and it is changed every day to indicate your schedule. Visual schedules help students understand expectations. It also helps our students anticipate the events of the day. It empowers them to build independence by interacting with their personal schedule. And it also ensures that every minute has a purpose. You don't want to ever call something downtime or free time. It's choice time. It's calm down time. It's sensory time. These are things that we want to exchange with that downtime free time, because we need to be explicitly teaching choice making and then slowly removing those supports. We want to make sure that we know how to make choices appropriately during, quote, free time before we just say pick something. And we want to be facilitating that. That's why they're with us. So we also want to allow students to prepare for a change in routine. So if it is an early release day, we want to make sure students know that the lunchtime changed. We want to make sure that they know that they're going to go to specials at a different time, or they're not going to go to specials at all. They thrive in routine. We all do, right? We like routine. And if something's changing, you might know it, but you want to make sure that you're giving them the courtesy of knowing it as well. Next, we're going to talk about our curriculum. You have an amazing amount of curriculum resources here in CMS, and I want to talk to you a little bit about what you have access to. First and foremost, you have access to Unique Learning Systems. Unique Learning Systems is a bunch of things. It's a bunch of things. It is a whole format that's going to give you access to tools that you need to really, I'm just going to read it right there, activate the potential of every student. It's differentiated. You'll see that within unique learning systems, you're going to have access to benchmarks and checkpoints. Benchmarks are those things that we want to make sure that we're doing 3 ELA and 3 math 3 times a year. That really helps us with progress monitoring. It gives us a baseline and benchmarks throughout the year. Checkpoints are something that you're going to have at the beginning and end of each month, and that is going to indicate their progress on a particular lesson, the monthly lessons. You have access to News to You, which is phenomenal. If you haven't got a chance to go into News to You and really dive in there, see how you can use it during your instructional time, please look at it. You have weather, you have current events, you have breaking news. There's so many great interactive tools that you can use in News to You, and they're absolutely fabulous. You're going to see that Unique Learning Systems differentiates its instruction for our students based on their needs. So for example, we have 1, 2, and 3 as our levels. You're going to create student profiles, and if your student is at level, let's say level 2, anything that you assign to that student in the assignments and the monthly lessons, it is going to be shifted into the appropriate differentiated level for them. You will see that they also differentiate the News to You articles. The current events will be simplified, and then they will increase in difficulty and decrease in supports as they go through the different levels of differentiation. And that is fantastic. Every student is going to have their own profile. They're going to be assigned to you in ULS, and you want to make sure that you're creating profiles for your kindergartners because they are new to ULS. You're going to see monthly lesson plans, and you're going to see supports in ELA, math, and their science curriculum is fabulous. Take a look at that. You definitely want to be in Symbol 6 Prime. That is access to all picture symbols, everything that you're going to need, you're going to be able to find in there, not only the individual pictures, but you're also going to see access to different formats for these pictures. So they have first then boards, they have different formats when it comes to like scheduling or worksheets. Take a look in Symbol Sticks. Pick around in there. There are so many amazing resources to help our students with their needs for visual supports. You're going to have access to core materials. Take a look at core materials. There you're going to find different supports based on time periods in the school day. So you might see some things for morning meeting or some things for homeroom, or you might see some behavioral supports. So fantastic. Take a look in there. You will find something that you can use for your students. The library is phenomenal. Check out the library. There are so many stories in that library, so many texts from social stories to holidays, and it's all different levels. You can find a story about feelings that is in an A level and all the way up to an E level. Like, fantastic resources, and they're all adapted, and they're rich visually and simplified text. It's phenomenal. You're going to see reports, which is great for our data collection. You can pull reports for students. So you're doing those checkpoints, the pre-post every month, and you can pull those reports. They're great to use during IEP meetings. You have access to the full transition curriculum through Transition Passport. There are so many instructional tools and instructional guides. You'll see pacing guides within the program. It is really an all-inclusive program. Everything that you need to support your students is going to be in that program. The tools that you need for alignment, use these tools, adapt them for your students. They are absolutely fantastic. We talked about News to You. You have access to the current event. The current issues are going to be a weekly newspaper, and it comes with communication boards, extension activities. There's even knock-knock jokes built in. There's vocabulary expansive. Like, it is so cool. The current events, I would do them every single week in my classroom. Breaking news is great because if you want to be doing additional news, those breaking news articles will give you supplements every single week. They're always putting out breaking news articles on News to You. They have them in entertainment, sports, and just regular breaking news. And then you can do the weather in your classroom as well. It is interactive, it's rich in visuals, and it gives students the opportunity to make choices and just practice that basic choice making skills using those visual supports. You're going to see that the newspaper activities are leveled, so you can choose from simplified to more advanced depending on your students' needs, individual or whole class. You're going to see class news, holidays, and Joey's Locker are all built into News to You. Fantastic resources. You're also going to have access to the Inspire Classics. That's 12 novels in place. They're adapted and they're symbol supported. So you're going to see that you can get these in different levels of content. So you have a more adapted, a more simplified level, and then you have higher level, less simplified support. So it's higher level content. It's going to be your Call of the Wild, Hamlet. It's going to be Huckleberry Finn, lots of stories that are going to be familiar, and Julius Caesar, so many different options in there, and they are differentiated. You also have access to the Attainment Hub, and that Attainment Hub is going to provide access to digital content that's associated with attainment products. So attainment science, math, ELA, you're going to see that in the hub, you have access to digital components of that. You also have within your classrooms the elementary attainment curriculum. That's going to be your early literacy skill builders, your early reading skill builders, building with stories, early numeracy curriculum. You're going to see early science and then also pathways. On the right-hand side, you can see some pictures of what that would look like in your classroom, those boxes. And you will also have access to the K-Basic math program, the Touch Math, that might be in your classroom as well. These are all curriculum resources that you can use to support your students. For secondary attainment curriculum, you may see in your classroom something called Teaching to the Standards. They have Teaching to the Standards for ELA, math, and science. And then there's also a curriculum called Explore American History. But our upper level, our secondary curriculum is also going to have Touch Math upper grades for the basic program. If you are in transition, you want to make sure that you're accessing our transition curriculum. It's a comprehensive transition curriculum for all students in CMS. It is going to address community-based instruction and training to improve post-school outcomes. And this is something that you have access to within the Google Drive. And you can actually click that picture once you get the PDF of this presentation, and it will take you directly to that folder. Something else you have access to is our social emotional learning curriculum. So character education in CMS is a partnership with parents and the community to foster honesty, responsibility, and caring students. It is an intentional and proactive effort to help students understand, care about, and act upon basic values that we all share. So if you click this link within the presentation or scan that QR code, it is going to open up our SEL curriculum for our extensions programs, and you'll see that it is adapted versions of the Zones of Regulation curriculum, as well as character trait curriculum and character development curriculum. Here are some teaching strategies that I just want to share with you. So some strategies are teacher-selected groups for appropriate peer social models. So you want to be strategically picking your groups based on appropriate peer social models, but also based on ability. You want to make sure that you're grouping your students so you are working on skills that are appropriate for those students. If you have a couple students who are working on counting from 1 to 10, you perhaps don't want to scoop those students in with the students who are working on multiplication or division. You might want to separate those groups so that they're working appropriately and differentiating based on their ability and needs. You want to limit distractions. We always want to limit those distractions. We know what it's like when we're in the middle of a great lesson and someone opens the door and just comes in and they are that distraction. Some of those distractions you can't avoid, but some distractions you can. So limit those distractions as much as you are able to control. Use pictures, visuals, symbols when possible to illustrate text, adapt text, but throughout your educational environment. You cannot have too many pictures or visuals. Somebody's going to benefit from them. You are going to benefit from them. Do not discount the effectiveness of visual supports. And allow students to use methods that work for them. Be flexible. Do not take things personally. If something doesn't work one way one day, you try it a different way the next day, and you work with that student until you find what works for them. That is what we do. We differentiate. We meet individual student needs. There is a method that's going to work, and you are going to find it. Lesson planning. So you want to make sure that your lesson plans are always easily accessible. We don't want to be searching around for our lesson plans when it's time to teach, right? You want to make sure that your lesson goals for the week are clearly stated within your lesson plan. And you also want those goals to be posted in the classroom as well. The lesson plans are going to be linked to the extensions of the North Carolina standards, and you also want to make sure that your para or your TA roles are clearly defined. Everyone wants to know what they're supposed to be doing. Nobody wants to guess. So a great way to do that is make sure that in your lesson plans, if you are intending for your para to be supporting students in a counting game or a read aloud with identification of the main character, you want to make sure that they know that ahead of time. Give them a little heads up. Here are some resources that you will find helpful. So here you will see supports for extensions, academic programming. You're going to see the extensions Canvas page linked here, and you're also going to see pacing guides. All of these links are going to be clickable once you have access to this presentation. This is an example of our new teacher extensions program's classroom checklist. This is something that we will be using when we come to see you to make sure that you have an understanding of all these different things, right? We want to make sure that you've had your ECATS training. We want to make sure that you're registered for CPI training. We want to make sure that your ULS account is set up and you have access and you're comfortable using it. These are things that your ECCT is going to make sure that you understand when they're coming out to see you. It's a good checklist. And you can click this and actually make a copy yourself if you just want to do this ahead of time before we come out to see you to make sure that you are comfortable and confident that you have access to these things. This is an extensions program classroom checklist. It's important to understand that this is the checklist that we use when we come in and we observe your classroom. We want to make sure that you have all these things in place. This is not an evaluative tool. I want to be very clear that this is a tool that helps us support you. So when the EC department comes in, when your ECCT comes in to support you, you may see that they're filling out this extensions program classroom checklist. It is so that we know how we can best serve you and support you in the classroom. Make sure that if you haven't already, that you register for the new teacher series. You want to go to My Talent, type in the course number that you see here, and you want to register for this course. You also want to register separately for that February course that I mentioned earlier. Use that course number and register in My Talent so that you get credit for these courses. Thank you so much for joining us for this presentation, and we look forward to seeing you in person coming soon.